Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Eliphas Levi. This is Dogma and Ritual. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but people do find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material and the link for my book, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, we are going to dive in and continue our exploration of Dogma and Ritual with Chapter 2. I'm going to try to get through the next 4 chapters. They are all dealing with numbers. And if we can get that into one section, that'll be great. But it's going to be a long video because this is over 40 pages. Chapter 2. The Pillars of the Temple. Chokma Domus Gnosis. Science is the absolute and complete possession of truth. Hence, have the sages of all the centuries trembled before such an absolute and terrible word. They have hesitated to arrogate to themselves the first privilege of divinity by assuming the possession of science, and have been contented, instead of the verb to know, with that which expresses cognizance, while, instead of the word science, they have adopted that of gnosis, which represents simply the notion of learning by intuition. What, in fact, does man know? Nothing, and at the same time, he is allowed to ignore nothing. Devoid of knowledge, he is called upon to know all. Now, knowledge supposes the duad, a being who knows and an object known. The duad is the generator of society and of law. It is also the number of the gnosis. The duad is unity multiplying itself in order to create, and hence, in sacred symbolism, Eve issues from the inmost bosom of Adam. The duad is masculine and feminine. It is quite literally the law of genders. It is all things contain both the masculine and the feminine. They contain both growth and death. It contains both creation and destruction. Right? That's the duad. The monad is the spirit. It is quite literally everything is one. All things in existence are one. The duad, or is that there are contained in all both sides of the equation. Right? So, in part, this is kind of right, but in part, this is mostly wrong. Right? The generator of society and law, yes, without conflict, I guess. There is no growth, there is no change, there isn't, right? But in the monad, everything is in stasis, right? The logos sets everything into motion. The motion is the conflict, right? The joining together of two individual elements to form a compound. That is a conflict between the two. That is the destructive or the nurturative side, depending on how you look at it. And so all things do indeed contain both positive and negative, both growth and destruction, both masculine and feminine. These are real things. But to assign the duad, the generator of society and law is... that's trying to read something in there that's probably not really contained in there, right? The Trinity would be a better of that. Adam is the human tetragram, summed up by the mysterious yod, type of the Kabbalistic phallus. By adding to this yod the triadic name of Eve, the name of Jehovah is formed, which is eminently the Kabbalistic and magical word, which the high priest in the temple pronounced Yokeva. So, unity, complete in the fruitlessness of the triad, forms therewith the tetrad, which is the key of all numbers, of all movements, and of all forms. So 4 is the key number for 3. Is that what you're saying? Right? The key of all numbers is 4? Okay, so that tells us what about the number 1? That tells us what about the number 3, right? It can tell you something about the number 2. There can be a key contained there, but there is no key here. This is not a key, right? You can look at it that way. It is a representation of the logos plus the individual, right? That is the Trinity plus the individual, which is you, right? And so, yes, there is kind of a key there, symbolically, allegorically, if you read that into it. but it is not intrinsic to the number 4 to be defined, or to define the number 3, or the number 5. It doesn't define it, right? It can be the predecessor, it can be the antecedent, yes, but that doesn't mean that it defines it. It's not the key to unlock the number 2. It's not the key to unlock the number 35, right? It's not that key, right? And so to call it a key is a little bit of a misnomer. There is knowledge contained due to the number 4 if you have the correct key, but the key is not the number 4, right? The key is the explanation of what 4 unlocks. It is not 4 in and of itself, and it is not the key to all numbers. Right, the reading into it, the inserting what you want to be there into something that is not necessarily there, is the reason why people like this fail in their belief of it. I mean, if you're unaware, if you just popped in, this is your first video, you weren't here for the intro, Eliphas Levi abandoned all of this. He put out a book where he stated it, and then he backed away from all of it. That's kind of important. By revelation about its own center, the square produces a circle equal to itself, and this is the quadrature of the circle, the circular movement of 4 equal angles around the same point. That which is above equals that which is below, says Hermes. Here then is the duad serving as the measure of unity, and the relation of equality between above and below forms with these the triad. The created principle is the ideal phallus. Freud would have a field day with this guy, and Freud is wrong. The created principle is the formal synthesis. The insertion of the vertical phallus in the horizontal synthesis forms the stauros of the Gnostics, or the philosophical cross of Masons. Thus, the intersection of 2 produces 4, which, by its movement, defines the circle of all degrees thereof. Yes, but you can also create a circle from 2, right? If you've got 2 points in a line and you rotate them, it does the exact same thing as 4 does. Or if you draw a triangle and you rotate the triangle, as long as it is equilateral, it will create a circle in the exact same way. You can do the exact same thing with the pentagram. You can do that with a dodecahedron, right? Just because you can do something with it doesn't mean that that's exactly what it is for. Alright, I do not know Hebrew, so I cannot name the Hebrew letters, right? This one is man, this one is woman, 1 is the principle, 2 is the word. A is the active, B is the passive. The monad is bohas, the duad is yakin. In the trigrams of Fohi, unity is the yang, and the duad is the yin. And this is the masculine and the feminine forms. And again, all things contain it. It is the second law of creation. It is the law of genders, right? All things contain both the masculine and the feminine. That is absolutely true. The pillars that the Masons use, Boaz and Yakin, which is spelled wrong here, symbolize that, right? You have 1 white and 1 black. That is quite literally the creative and destructive forces, the positive and the negative energies. You, the acolyte, who is seeking the gnosis, you are not supposed to cling to either one of those pillars, right? Neither the masculine nor the feminine. You are supposed to walk between them in the balance thereof, because you too contain both the masculine and the feminine, and you are supposed to find within yourself the balance between those, right? You're not meant to be merely destructive. You are meant to create. You're not meant to be merely creative. You are meant to destroy. That is what the duad is. That is the symbology of the pillars. That is the whole point of them. And this is talking about that, right? Boaz and Yakin, even though it is spelled incorrectly, right? The yin and the yang is the exact same concept. The exact same thing. Boaz and Yakin are the names of the 2 symbolical pillars without the chief door of Solomon's Kabbalistic temple. In the Kabbalah, these pillars explain all mysteries of antagonism, whether natural, political, or religious, and they explain also the procreative struggle between man and woman. For, according to the law of nature, the woman must resist the man, and he must entice or overcome her. There's a lot to unpack right there, especially if you consider the fact that his object of desire was at least half his age and noted to be a problem due to that. And we saw that in the introduction or in the biography. And so this right here, you are not meant to overcome a woman. But I don't care who you are. If you are a man, you can talk about enticement. Right? Enticement is conversation. It is getting to know someone. Overcoming implies a force, and there should be no force intended at all in that situation. Right? According to the law of nature, a woman must resist a man, so she can't be attracted. She can't make the first move. There can't be any equality there. She doesn't contain masculine principles. This is all on the man. The active principle seeks the passive principle. The plenum desires the void. The serpent's jaw attracts the serpent's tail, and in turning upon himself, he, at the same time, flies and pursues himself. Woman is the creation of man, and universal creation is the bride of the first principle. I do not hold to that at all. Right? I don't hold to God held or put the man to sleep and took his rib. And I don't believe that. Right? There's a lot wrong in Genesis. That is one of those things. It's possible. There is an entire possibility that there was an entity who had the technological capacity to take a rib and through DNA manipulation create some kind of a clone variant. That is possible. I don't necessarily believe that that's what had to have happened. Right? And so we don't know whether woman is the creation of man. Right? I would go with probably not. Right? This is an extremely misogynistic viewpoint, right? Well, of course, man is superior to woman. What are you even talking about? When the Supreme Being became a creator, he erected a yod, or a phallus, to provide a place in the fullness of the uncreated light. Show me the documentation of that. It was necessary to hollow out a satesis, or trench, of shadow equivalent to the dimension determined by his creative desire, and attributed by him to the ideal yod of the radiating light. Such is the mysterious language of the Kabbalist and the Talmud, and on account of vulgar ignorance and malignity, it is impossible for us to explain or simplify it further. What then is the creation? It is the mansion of the creative word. What is the satesis? It is the mansion of the phallus. What is the nature of the active principle? To diffuse. What is that of the passive? To gather in and to fructify. What it man? He who initiates, who bruises, who labors, who sows. What is woman? She who forms, reunites, irrigates, and harvests. Man wages war, woman brings peace about. Man destroys to create, woman builds up to preserve. Man is revolution, woman is conciliation. Man is the father of Cain, woman is the mother of Abel. Oh my fucking God. All of this is just trying to read something that you want to be in there, right? None of this is intrinsic. Right? Yes, we can talk allegorically about masculine and feminine, right? The masculine is the penetrative force. It is the initiator of change. It is the destructive element. The feminine element is the nurturative, the receptive, the grounding. That is all true, right? But it is not intrinsically you, right? I'm a man. I have plenty of feminine tendencies, right? That's not to say that I'm whatever, I don't like the taste of penis. It's not in my forte. I like what I've got. But I can cry, right? If there's a sad thing, I have no problem crying. If I have memories, there's no problem with that. I can nurture things. I can do the feminine stuff. Now, that doesn't make me feminine. I'm a rather masculine fella. But I'm perfectly fine embracing my feminine side. And yes, that sets me apart a little bit. I got it, right? But women can destroy. Women can initiate war. Women can do all of the things that are said here, right? The overarching masculine and feminine would be a better way to refer to this than male and female or man and woman, right? That is implying something. That is looking through it with a certain lens on. Man is better than woman. That is what I read from this, and maybe I'm wrong, right? I don't mind being wrong, but when I read this, especially in light of the things we know about the man, then that's what I see here, right? This is him trying to explain something true, and he has some of the basics true, but he does not have a deep, abiding understanding of the concepts which he is talking about. He is merely parroting something that he read somewhere else. That's what this is. Back to the text. What, moreover, is wisdom? It is the agreement and union of two principles: the mildness of Abel directing the activity of Cain, man guided by the sweet inspirations of woman, debauchery conquered by lawful marriage, revolutionary energy softened and subdued by the gentleness of order and peace, pride subjugated by love, science acknowledging the inspirations of faith. Boy, there's a lot here. Hold on. The mildness of Abel directing the activity of Cain. If you are unaware, I have done a Bible study. It is 162 videos of me reading through the Bible in the exact same way that we are doing right here, right now. And what we discovered in that is there is an awful lot wrong. One of the things wrong is the conception here, right? Cain and Abel were brothers. When they were cast out, Adam and Eve, when they were cast out of the garden, they were told, you will plow the earth. It will be hard for you to make food. You will toil your whole life. There will be a snake who tries to bite your heel. You're going to crush his head, right? That's what they were told. Then they go out and they have kids. And one of those kids is a gardener. He likes to garden. He goes out and he plants his fields. He does exactly what God said that they would do. They would toil to plant the earth and harvest their food. That's exactly what he does, right? The other guy, he collects animals, right? He does that. He's a shepherd. He keeps the animals and he kills one and he makes a sacrifice. And God says, you know what? That sacrifice is good. And so he accepts it. And Cain, who is doing the right thing, he looks at his brother and is like, oh, well, let me try that. And so he takes a portion of his crops and he makes it, right? That was not accepted. Now, there's a fundamental problem here. And if you've been around for any length of time, you know exactly what it is. They're not allowed to eat meat. They do not get the permission to eat meat for another couple thousand years, right? It is not until Noah gets off of the boat, right, after the flood, after he has already collected all the clean and unclean animals, before there were clean and unclean animals. He brought them on there 2 by 2 or 7 by 7, depending on what they were, right? He comes off this boat with all of these animals, and then he makes a sacrifice. And an angel comes down and says, this is good. He says, go forth, be fruitful, multiply, subdue the earth, be stewards thereof, shed no blood of man. Oh, and by the way, now you can eat meat. It is not until after the flood that they've given the capacity to eat meat. And so Abel's got a really big problem. He's out there killing animals for no reason whatsoever. That's a major problem, wouldn't you think? Wouldn't you think that's a big problem? I would think that would be a big problem. And so this is a problem. The mildness of Abel directing the activity of Cain. Man guided by the sweet inspirations of woman. Debauchery conquered by lawful marriage. Revolutionary energy softened and subdued by the gentleness of order and peace. Pride subjugated by love. In a way, yes, right? Love is a great humbling agent, but pride and humbleness reside in an entirely different place, right? That is an entirely different function than the love and wrath which resides at the bottom. That is the two keys of that, right? Love and wrath are the two. Chastity and lust are the two. Temperance and gluttony are the two, right? There are two sides to every coin, and I'm being pedantic here with this. I am fully aware of that. Pride subjugated by love, yes, kind of, but it needs to be subjugated by your humility. That's what needs to be subjugated. Then, human science becomes wise and submits itself to the infallibility of universal reason, instructed by love or universal charity, which again are two different spots. Then it can take the name of gnosis, because it knows, at least, that as yet it cannot boast of knowing perfectly. The monad can only manifest by the duad. That is exactly opposite. Unity itself and the notion of unity at once constitute two. Now, as I said before, right? Before the beginning there was God, and God was, and it was good. And God came and said, let us create. That was the monad, right? When God went from the infinite into the finite, limiting himself into the creation, becoming the spirit, that was the monad. Everything existing all at once, everything being exactly equal. The logos comes in and is like, hey, change. And everything starts moving, and then that happens, right? So you go from the monad to the duad of creation into the trinity of movement. That is not the opposite. It is not the monad can only manifest by the duad. The duad can only manifest inside of the monad, and therefore the monad had to be there first. That's like simple, right? That's like base level. The unity of the macrocosm reveals itself by the two opposite points of two triangles. Human unity fulfills itself to right and left. Primitive man is androgynous. All organs of the human body are disposed in pairs, excepting the nose, the tongue, the umbilicus, and the Kabbalistic yod, and the liver, and the bladder, and the prostate. Like, what are you even talking about here? All organs of the human body, like, you've only got one skin. Like, again, reading something into something that is not necessarily there. Divinity, one in its essence, has two essential conditions as the fundamental grounds of its being: necessity and liberty. The laws of supreme reason necessitate and rule liberty in God, who is of necessity wise and reasonable. To make a light visible, God has merely hypothecated the shadow. To manifest the truth, he has permitted the possibility of doubt. No, right? To make light visible, he didn't hypothesize the shadow. Light became, and shadow was. Right? They are, again, two sides of the coin. You cannot have one without the other. It is simply impossible. Right? If there is light, it is going to make a shadow from any object. If there is shadow, it is going to obscure the light. These two things are intrinsic to each other. There is no separation. And shadow is not hypothetical. Right? To manifest the truth, he has permitted the possibility of doubt. No, to manifest the truth, he has allowed the lie. Right? That's the duality there. It is not doubt. Doubt doesn't make the truth wrong. The lie does, right? Well, it doesn't really make it wrong. It makes the understanding wrong. It's not doubt that's the problem. It's believing the lie. The shadow bodies forth the light, and the possibility of error is requisite for the temporal manifestation of truth. If the buckler of Satan did not intercept the spear of Michael, the might of the angel would be lost in the void, or manifested by infinite destruction launched below from above. Did not the heel of Michael restrain Satan in his ascent? Satan would dethrone God, or rather he would lose himself in the abysses of the altitude. This is another fundamentally intrinsic misunderstanding of everything. Satan is not real. Let me say that again. Satan is not real. Satan is the personification of the force of destruction, the negative aspect, in exactly the same way that Christ is represented as the light aspect, even though that is a completely misplaced notion, right? Satan, as an intrinsic oppositional force to the Creator, is not a thing. There is no personified God of opposition, right? The only thing most real about Satan is that it is the personification of the negative aspect. Michael is the personification of the positive aspect. There is a conflict here, but it was not a literal one. Michael did not actually restrain Satan. And this one's really going to piss some people off. You have to embrace and use both the positive and the negative powers in order to reach balance, right? You have access to both the positive and the negative, and you can use them both, and it is intrinsic to actually doing the things that I talk about in all of these playlists, the actual manipulation of the electromagnetic forces of creation, which is the Holy Spirit. You have to have the equilibrium with both. If you are focusing on one, you are doing it wrong. If you are focusing on the other one, you are doing it wrong. If you are only bringing up the light energy, you're absolutely doing it backwards. Now, again, without the light, there is no darkness. Without the darkness, there is no light. It is the balance that we seek. Hence, Satan is needful to Michael as the pedestal to the statue, and Michael is necessary to Satan as the brake to the locomotive. In analogical and universal dynamics, one learns only on that which resists. Furthermore, the universe is balanced by two forces which maintain it in equilibrium: the force which attracts and that which repels. Positive and negative, baby. It is quite literally the law of the genders. They exist alike in physics, in philosophy, and in religion. In physics, they produce equilibrium. In philosophy, criticism. In religion, progressive revelation. The ancients represented this mystery in the conflict between Eros and Anteros, the struggle between Yaakov and the angel, and by the equilibrium of the Golden Mountain, which gods on the one side and demons on the other hold bound by the symbolic serpent of India. It is also typified by the caduceus of Hermanubis, by the two cherubim of the ark, of the twofold sphinx of the chariot of Osiris, and by the two seraphim, respectively, black and white. Its scientific reality is demonstrated by the phenomena of polarity, and by the universal law of sympathies and antipathies. The undiscerning disciples of Zoroaster divided the duad without referring it to unity, thus separating the pillars of the temple and endeavoring to have God. Conceive the absolute as two, and you must immediately conceive it as three, to recover the unity principle. For this reason, the material elements, analogous to the divine elements, are understood firstly as four, explained as two, and exist ultimately as three. And again, this is simply wanting something to be there that is not necessarily true, right? I have given my explanation of the monad, the duad, and the trinity, which we will probably be hitting again, and I will absolutely link the video in the corner so that you can see exactly how it should be as opposed to what is being said. Right? Revelation is the duad. Every word is double and supposes two. The ethic which results from revelation is founded on antagonisms, which results from the duad. Spirit and form attract and repel one another like sign and idea, fiction and truth. Supreme reason necessitates dogma when communicating to finite intelligences, and dogma, by its passage from the domain of ideas to that of forms, participates in two worlds and has inevitably two senses speaking in succession or simultaneously. That is, to the spirit and the flesh. So there are two forces in the moral region, one which assaults and one which curbs and expiates. They are represented in the mythos of Genesis by the typical personalities of Cain and Abel. Abel oppresses Cain by reason of his moral superiority, except he was not morally superior. Right? That, again, is one of the key problems with that story. People look at it in exactly the wrong way. There are problems. Cain, to get free, immortalizes his brother by slaying him and becomes the victim of his own crime. Cain could not suffer the life of Abel, and the blood of Abel suffers not the sleep of Cain. In the gospel, the type of Cain is replaced by that of the prodigal son, whom his father fully forgives, because he returns after having endured much. This is another one of those analogies that is just completely misunderstood, right? I have given the prodigal son story many times, but here's what actually happens in that story, right? There's a father and he's got two kids, and the younger of the two says, you know what, I don't want to stay here. I want to take my inheritance and go. And so he lets him. He gives him his inheritance and goes off and he squanders it. He becomes destitute and winds up sleeping with pigs, which, by the way, should be a whole different problem that is never addressed. But he goes home. Now, as he is going home, the father and the other brother are out in the field working, right, doing the things that the second brother should have been there helping with. And the dad looks up and he sees coming across the hill his son. And he drops everything and he takes off running. He says, "Go kill the fatted calf. My son has come home." And he runs up there to greet his son. And he doesn't place requirements upon the child, right? The child didn't have to come up and say, "Father, I am sorry." He saw him coming and he ran to him. That is exactly how God treats you. He wants you to be repentful. He wants you to be remorseful. He wants you to turn towards him. But when he sees you coming, he just takes off for you. The son didn't have to kill the calf in order to come home. The calf got killed because the son was coming home. And that is exactly opposite of the way that the prodigal son is explained in any church across the entirety of the world. As far as I am aware, every single sermon that I have heard focuses on the son coming back, but not on the fact that there was no requirement for that there was no sacrifice that he had to give. The sacrifice was given by the father willingly because he came home. That's a big deal. There is mercy and there is justice in God. To the just he dispenses justice, and to the sinners, mercy. In the soul of the world, which is the universal agent, there is a current of love and a current of wrath. That is the base level chakra. This is ambient and all-penetrating fluid. This ray, loosened from the sun's splendor and fixed by the weight of the atmosphere and the power of central attraction. This body of the Holy Spirit, which we term the universal agent, while it was typified by the ancients under the symbol of a serpent devouring his tail, this electromagnetic ether, this vital and luminous caloric, is depicted in archaic monuments by the girdle of Isis, twice folded in a love knot around two poles, as well as by the serpent devouring his own tail, emblematic of prudence and of Saturn. Motion and life consist in the extreme tension of two forces. "I would thou wert cold or hot," says the master. As a fact, a great sinner is more really alive than is a tepid effeminate man, and the fullness of his return to virtue will be in proportion to the extent of his errors. She who is destined to crush the serpent's head is intelligence, which ever rises above the stream of blind forces. The Kabbalists call her the Virgin of the Sea, whose dripping feet the infernal dragon, stupefied by delight, crawls forward to lick with his fiery tongues. These are the hieratic mysteries of the duad, but there is one, and the last of all, which must not be made known. The reason, according to Hermes Trismegistus, being the malcomprehension of the vulgar, who would ascribe to the necessities of science the immoral aspect of blind fatality. "By the fear of the unknown must the crowd be restrained," he observes in another place, and Christ also said, "Cast not your pearls before swine, lest trampling them under their feet they turn and rend you." The tree of the knowledge of good and evil, of which the fruits are death, is the type of this hieratic secret of the duad, which could only be misconstrued if divulged, and would lead, commonly, to the unholy denial of free will, which is the principle of moral life. And I agree with this. Now, you do have free will. A lot of people will not agree with that. The future holds many possibilities, and God has accounted for every single one of those possibilities. When you wake up in the morning, you make many choices, right? You make a choice to go to the bathroom or to turn on your coffee first. You make a choice to drink your coffee or drink orange juice. You make a choice to eat breakfast or not. All of those choices have consequences. You may never know, right? If you wake up one day and you eat an egg instead of cereal, that might be the choice that leads you to going home. That is entirely possible through a convoluted series of steps. But all of those choices lead you down the timeline that you are choosing. Now, that's how I refer to it. Other people refer to it in different ways, but every one of those choices is a branching off point, right? Now, you make the choice to go left. In another reality, you made the choice to go right, and those go off without your conscious decisions anymore, right? That timeline continues because for someone else, that is the timeline they're supposed to be on. But your timeline, you chose to go left. That leads to a whole different set of consequences. God has accounted for you going left or right, and He is attempting to make it the best choice. He wants you to choose left, right? That's the best choice. But you can choose right. And if you do choose right, He will make another left. And you can choose another left, or you can continue going right. Now, right and left here are completely arbitrary. The choices that you make, either way, are accounted for by God. What you are doing is choosing your timeline. I am choosing this set of consequences. Now, those consequences may be wonderful. They might be horrific. And you really won't know until you actually make the choice which one is which. The only thing that you can do is to rely upon your intuition about them. This feels like it's a bad idea. I'm not going to do it. And then it turns out it was a bad idea. That's generally how your intuition works. So, you have the ability to choose. God has already accounted for both of those options. You get to decide, I'm going to go this route. I'm going to learn this lesson. This is how it's supposed to be for me. There is an exception to that. Sometimes there are things called bottlenecks. Now, I call them bottlenecks. Other people will call them other things. But they are the points that you don't get to choose about. Things that happen to you. Right? Some of those are direct responses to your choices. Right? But regardless, those choices would have led to the same thing, like my broken leg. Right? There was no way of avoiding my neighbor attacking me for no reason. Right? That was a bottleneck. I'm supposed to learn from that bottleneck. I did. I learned some humility. I learned gratefulness. I've learned appreciation. I've learned some lessons because of this broken leg. But it was an unavoidable, it was not my decision that made that happen. It was something outside of myself. It was a learning point that I agreed to long before the incorporation. And that's how I view these things. And if that is something that you would like a greater understanding to, right? If that is something that you would like explained in greater detail, because this is already going to be a lot longer than I thought it was going to be, and it's already was going to be long, check out my book. It's relatively inexpensive. It is easily accessible. All of the information is contained there in a little bit more of a concise way because I could review it. You do absolutely have a choice. That is the point. Back to the text. It is, hence, in the essence of things, that the revelation of this secret means death, and it is not at the same time the great secret of magic. But the arcanum of the duad leads up to that of the tetrad, or more correctly, proceeds therefrom, and is resolved by the triad, which contains the word of the enigma propounded by the Sphinx, as it was required to have been found in order to save the life, atone for the unconscious crime, and establish the kingdom of Eliphas. In the hieroglyphic work of Hermes, the Terra, called also the Book of Teote, the duad is represented either by the horn of Isis, having her head veiled and an open book partially concealed under her mantle, or otherwise by a sovereign lady, Juno, the Greek goddess, having one hand uplifted towards heaven and the other pointed to earth, as if formulating by this gesture the one and twofold dogma, which is the foundation of magic and begins the marvelous symbols of the emerald table of Hermes. All right, so we're going to pause again because I have done a little bit of work on this one. Right. As far as I can tell, there is zero Emerald Tablet of Hermes. There is nowheres on the entirety of the planet, anywhere, that you can go and lay your eyes upon this thing. That does not mean that it never existed, right? It could be hidden away in one of the storage places, right? The Vatican has an enormous storage place full of all kinds of things that you will never get to see because they contain too much knowledge for you. The same is true for the Smithsonian. The same is true for several other places, right? The London Museum. It is possible that there is indeed an Emerald Table of Hermes there, but it is fairly verifiable that it was not during the time of Mr. Levi here. It was long gone before then. The hieroglyphic work of Hermes, the Tarot, also called the Book of Teot, our Tarot, which is the fullness of it, right? Like, it was only created, I think it was the late 1800s, so it's not like it's from antiquity. The problem is that there is no tarot from antiquity. There are some cards which some people consider to be the progenitors of tarot, but they're not. Like, they're not even related for the most part at all. Some of the allegories can be taken the same, but they're not in the same order. They're not depicted the same way. The tarot that we see, the tarot that I've done a couple of videos on, was created, right? And created's probably the wrong word, but defined according to Mr. White, right? Who did the biographical introduction to this book. He came up with the artwork. He got Mrs. Smith to make it, and together they created the tarot deck. And so I don't understand where this reference to Teot is coming from, right? It seems to be an insertion that you are trying to link these two things together, which may or may not. There are no evidences to link them together. That's the big deal, right? That's the big problem with this. I believe that tarot works because of the timelines, right? We just talked about these timelines and you're making these choices. I believe that tarot is a way for spirit to use these symbols that are prearranged and pre-agreed upon to communicate possibilities along the timelines. That's how I intend to use it whenever I am doing my videos. The end of this month, the start of next month, I'm going to be doing a daily tarot. It's important to keep that in mind, right? We don't have the source material. We have agreed upon these symbols. And because we have agreed upon these symbols, then Spirit can use these symbols to give us prearranged signals. These signals can help us determine some of the things that might be coming along the way so that we can better assimilate them and better manifest the desired outcome. That does not mean that tarot is going to be infallible, ever. It does not mean that you should base your solid decisions upon tarot, ever. It is giving you, through the mirror dimly, a brief glimpse into some possibilities. Those possibilities can change according to the decisions that you make. And so you should always take these things with a grain of salt, right? But, in my experience, it's been fairly reliable, right? Not to the point that I would base financial decisions upon it, but enough to keep an eye out that maybe these things will manifest in some manner that I am unaware of. That appears to be the whole reason for tarot, right? There is no direct link to Hermes, to the ancient wisdom, even to the 1600s, right? Which is when it began kind of percolating into the knowing, right? But it wasn't defined in the way that we have it until now. There were many decks, and they were like the playing cards that we use. People use those for tarot. Probably that was the original intention of them. And I'm going to get off of the tarot if you're interested. It is part of the Esoterica playlist. It has its own playlist. So, back to the text. In the Apocalypse of St. John, there is a reference to two witnesses or martyrs on whom prophetic tradition confers the names of Elias and Enoch. Elias, man of faith, enthusiasm, miracle. Enoch, one with him who is called Hermes by the Egyptians, honored by the Phoenicians as Cadmus, author of the sacred alphabet and the universal key to the initiations of the Logos, father of the Kabbalah. He, according to the sacred allegories, did not die like other men, but was transported to heaven to return at the end of time. All right, so there is the book of Enoch. We have read it, right? But I would not put a whole lot of faith in that book at all. Now, that book is referenced in the Bible several times, but was removed from the Bible. And we do not know that the book of Enoch that we have is the actual book of Enoch which was referred to. The only reference in the Bible to Enoch is like three sentences long or something. There was Enoch. He was a holy man without blemish, and he was taken away. It's pretty close to all that we get about Enoch, right? We do not get that he was the father of the Kabbalah. We do not get that the Egyptians honored him. We do not get that by the Phoenicians he was Cadmus. We do not get that he created the alphabet. We do not get the universal key to the initiations of the Logos. None of that is contained in the Bible. None of that. Not a single part of that. Now, you can take the Bible as allegory, but much like what we are seeing here, you have to try to read into something that may not be there. That's what happened with the Bible too, right? A lot of things are recorded, but that doesn't mean that they are true. As a matter of fact, the Bible directly contradicts itself, often in the same chapter, many times. And so, take all of it with a grain of salt. Much the same statement is made of St. John himself, who recovered and explained in his Apocalypse the symbolism of the word of Enoch. The resurrection of St. John and Enoch, expected at the close of the ages of ignorance, will be the restitution of their doctrine by the comprehension of the Kabbalistic keys which unlock the temple of unity and universal philosophy, too long a cult, and reserved solely for the elect who perish at the hands of the world. But we have said that the reproduction of the monad by the duad leads of necessity to the conception and dogma of the triad. So we come now to this great number, which is the fullness and perfect word of unity. Chapter 3. The Triangle of Solomon. Plenitude vocus bina physis. The perfect word is the triad because it supposes an intelligent principle, a speaking principle, and a principle spoken. The Absolute, revealing itself by speech, endows this speech with a sense equivalent to itself, and in the understanding thereof, creates itself a third time. Thus, also, the sun manifests itself by its light, and proves or makes this manifestation efficacious by heat. What? It supposes an intelligent principle, a speaking principle, and a principle spoken. That would be the Logos, the creative spoken word, which put all things into motion, right? The Absolute, revealing itself by speech, that would be the created word, endows this speech with a sense equivalent to itself. That's where you lose me. And, in the understanding thereof, creates itself a third time. What? No. The sun manifests itself by its light. The sun is already manifested and then produces light and heat. That is not... The triad is traced in space by the heavenly zenith, the infinite height, connected with east and west by two straight diverging lines. With this visible triangle, reason compares another which is invisible, but is assumed to be equal in dimension. The abyss is its apex, and its reversed base is parallel to the horizontal line stretching from east to west. These two triangles, combined in a single feature, which is the six-pointed star, form the sacred symbol of Solomon's seal, the resplendent star of the macrocosm. The notion of the infinite and the absolute is expressed by this sign, which is the grand pantacle, that is to say, the most simple and complete abridgment of the science of all things. There is absolutely something represented by the six-pointed star. I have discussed it several times. It is the as above, so below. It is the human chakras, all 8 of them, symbolized by the number 6, right? Now, what do you mean, Pitt? You have 6 points, right? That is 6. You have 1 point in the middle, which is the origination point. That makes 7. And then you have a circle which surrounds it, which makes 8. And they all hold significance, which I have covered several times, and we're already getting along. But it is quite literally the triplicate, right? The triangle is body, mind, and soul, right? As above, so below. Those are the keys. Grammar itself attributes 3 persons to the verb. The first is that which speaks, the second, that which is spoken to, and the third, the object. In creating, the infinite prince speaks to himself of himself. And so you're breaking it, right? This is your theory. 3 persons. The first speaks, the second is spoken to, and the third is the object. And then this, the infinite priest, speaks to himself of himself. Absolutely makes sense. Such is the explanation of the triad and the origin of the dogma of the Trinity. Now, I have already given the explanation for the Trinity, right? In the beginning, or before the beginning, there was God. God limited himself to the Spirit, and then he put the Spirit into motion. 1, 2, 3. The magical dogma is also 1 and 3, and 3 and 1. That which is above is like or equal to that which is below, which is what I was just talking about with the 6-pointed star. Thus, 2 things which resemble one another, and the word which signifies their resemblance, makes 3. The triad is the universal dogma, as opposed to the duad, which was just the universal dogma. In magic, principle. Realization, adaptation. In alchemy, azoth, incorporation, transmutation. In theology, God, incarnation, redemption. No, sir. In the human soul, thought, love, and action. In the family, father, mother, and child. The triad is the end and supreme expression of love. We seek one another as 2, only to become 3. These are reasonable explanations, but none of them are intelligent explanations. There are 3 intelligible worlds which correspond one with another by hierarchic analogy: the natural or physical, the spiritual or metaphysical, and the divine or religious worlds. 1, 2, 2 and 3. 1, 2, 3. That's a trinity. There's a trinity here, there's a trinity here, and there's a trinity here. That's 3 trinities. All these revelations are logical deductions from the first mathematical notions of being and number. Unity must multiply itself in order to become active. An indivisible, motionless, and sterile principle would be unity dead and incomprehensible. That's why we have the duad. Were God only one, he would never be creator or father. No, God was one. He created all and became all. And so he is not 3, but is instead all. Were he 2, there would be antagonism or division in the infinite, which would mean the division also of, or death, of all possible things. He is therefore 3, for the creation by himself and in his image of the infinite multitude of beings and numbers. Infinite would imply more than 3. So, he is truly 1 in himself and triple in our conception, which also brings us to behold him as triple in himself, and 1 in our intelligence and our love. This is a mystery for the faithful and a logical necessity for the initiate into the absolute and real sciences, and hopefully I have given you the keys to open that particular door. The Word, manifested by life, is realization or incarnation. Kinda, but again, no, right? We just talked about the Word is quite literally everything in motion. That is true, right? Before the beginning, there was God. God created all things and became all things as one, but within that one is contained the positive and the negative. In order for change to happen, the positive and the negative to have a point, it had to be in motion. Things have to change. Logos is the manifestation of change. It is the realization of self, kind of. Yes, you are here, but you are not the Logos fully. Nobody ever has ever been the Logos fully. There is no person who is the incarnation of Logos. We are all collectively the incarnation of Logos. but so is the air around you. When I move my hand, it creates change in the air. That is real. That is the Logos in motion. Change is happening. These lights, they're giving off the Logos. Logos is light. Logos is heat. Logos is change. My brain giving off the Logos. Logos is thought. Logos is change. The Logos is beyond personification, and anything that is personifying it is going to be wrong. The life of the Word, accomplishing its cyclic movement, is adaptation or redemption. The triple dogma was known in all sanctuaries, illuminated by the tradition of the sages. Do you wish to ascertain which is the true religion? Seek that which realizes most in the divine order, which humanizes God and makes man divine, which preserves the triadic dogma intact, which clothes the Word with flesh by making God manifest to the hands and eyes of the most ignorant. Well, that's a problem. Which finally is, by its doctrine, suitable to all and can adapt itself to all. The religion which is hierarchic and cyclic, having allegories and images for children, an exalted philosophy for grown men, sublime hopes and sweet consolations for the old. The primeval sages, when seeking the first of causes, beheld good and evil in the world. They considered the shadow and the light. They compared winter with spring, age with youth, life with death, and their conclusion was this: the first cause is beneficent and severe. It gives and takes away life. Then there are two contrary principles, the one good and the other evil, exclaimed the disciples of Manes. Again, everything contains them. No, the two principles of universal equilibrium are not contrary, although contrasted in appearance. For a singular wisdom opposes one to another. Good is on the right, evil on the left. That is an arbitrary decision. But the supreme excellence is above both, applying evil to the victory of good and good to the amendment of evil. The principle of harmony is in unity, and it is this which imparts such power to the uneven number in magic. Now, the most perfect of the odd numbers is 3, because it is the trilogy of unity. The most perfect would be 1. All things are 1. In the trigrams of Fohi, the superior triad is composed of 3 yang, or masculine figures, because nothing passive can be admitted into the idea of God, considered as the principle of production in the 3 worlds. For the same reason, the Christian Trinity by no means permits the personification of the Mother. Yeah, that's why. Who is implicitly included in that of the Son. For the same reason, also, it is contrary to the laws of hieratic and orthodox symbology to personify the Holy Ghost under the form of a woman. Now, I agree, but that is because I don't personify the Spirit, right? I don't personify God. Now, I call it He because to most people, God is considered He. But it's not. It contains both the masculine and the feminine. It is beyond our comprehension. That includes genders. The Holy Ghost is a manifestation of the same thing, and it contains both the masculine and the feminine. It is the Spirit. It is all of creation in existence, all at the exact same time. It is quite literally the definition of the positive and the negative, right? Now, the Holy Ghost is the stasis, the Logos is the movement. And neither one of them can be defined either as masculine or feminine because they contain both. Woman comes forth from man as nature comes forth from God, and that is something that is assumed because it was written in a book somewheres which contradicts itself in that same damn chapter. So, Christ ascends himself to heaven and assumes the Virgin Mother. We speak of the ascension of the Savior and the assumption of the Mother of God. God, considered as Father, has nature for his daughter. As Son, he has the Virgin for his mother and the Church for his bride. This punctuation is wrong, right? This should be over there. As Holy Spirit, he regenerates and fructifies humanity. Hence, in the trigrams of Fohi, the 3 inferior yin correspond to the 3 superior yang. For these trigrams constitute a pentacle like that of the two triangles of Solomon, but with the triadic interpretation of the 6 points of the blazing star. I don't think that's the image that we're wanting to put there. Dogma is only divine inasmuch as it is truly human. That is to say, insofar as it sums up the highest reason of humanity. So, also the Master, whom we term the man-God, called himself the Son of Man. Revelation is the expression of belief accepted and formulated by universal reason in the human word, on which account it is said that the divinity is human and the humanity divine in the man-God. We affirm all this philosophically, not theologically, without infringing in any way on the teaching of the Church, which condemns, and must always condemn, magic. Paracelsus and Agrippa did not set up an altar against altar, but bowed to the ruling religion of their time, to the elect of science, the things of science, to the faithful, the things of faith. And this hymn of the royal son, the Emperor Julian, gives a theory of the triad, which is almost identical with that of the illuminated Swedenborg. The sun of the divine world is the infinite, spiritual, and uncreated light, which is verbalized, so to speak, in the philosophical world, and becomes the fountain of souls and of truth. Then it incorporates and becomes visible light in the sun of the third world, the central sun of our suns, of which the fixed stars are the ever-living sparkles. The Kabbalists compare the spirit to a substance which remains fluid in the divine medium, and under the influence of the essential light, its exterior, however, becoming solidified, like wax, when exposed to the air in the colder realms of reasoning or of visible forms. These shells, envelopes, petrified or carnified, or such an expression possible, are the source of errors or of evil which connect with the heaviness and hardness of the animal envelopes. In the book Zohar, and in that of the Revolution of the Souls, perverse spirits or evil demons are never named otherwise than as shells, cortices. The cortices of the world of spirits are transparent, while those of the material world are opaque. Bodies are only temporary shells, whence souls have to be liberated. This implies the prison planet thing, right? You are here for punishment, and I absolutely vehemently stand against that. You are here for experience, and some of those experiences do suck, but it is not an intrinsically mournful life. It is not intrinsically bad. It is not intrinsically toilful, right? You can make it so. Your attitude determines a lot of that, but it is not intrinsically bad. It is not a prison. You are not condemned here. God did not send you here just to be condemned. All of those are wrong, right? Your body is a temporary shell, but your soul has not to be liberated from it. You are here to overcome the world, to assimilate and balance all of the things of the world, not for an afterlife. But those which in this life obey the body compose for themselves an interior body or fluidic shell, which after death becomes their prison house and torment, until the time arrives when they succeed in dissolving it in the warmth of the divine light, towards which, however, the burden of their grossness hinders them from ascending. I disagree heartily with all of this. Indeed, they can do so only after infinite struggles, and by the mediation of the just, who stretch forth their hands towards them. During this whole period of the process, they are devoured by the interior activity of the captive spirit, as in a burning furnace. Those who attain the pyre of expiation burn themselves thereon, like Hercules upon Mount Etna, and so are delivered from their sufferings, but the courage of the majority fails before this ordeal, which seems to them as a second death, more appalling than the first. And so they remain in hell, which is rightly and actually eternal. But therein souls are never precipitated, nor are they ever retained, despite themselves. Alright, so, just so we're aware, I have said it many times, and I will say it many more times, I've done a Bible study. We read through the entire, well, pretty close to the entirety of the Old Testament, and hell is not in there. There is no heaven either, just so we're equal. There is no eternal burning punishment for any human being. The sacrifice was not to forgive you from sin. It was to gain the blessing of God. And that was even wrong. And so, no, again, vehemently disagree with this. There is no eternal burning condemnation. You came from somewheres, God. You will return to somewheres, God. And maybe there's some judgment, but I don't think so because of my own personal divine revelations. You don't have to believe those. But it is factually accurate that there is no heaven or hell contained in the Old Testament. There is a Sheol, which is the land of the dead, which everybody returns to, which is in accordance with what I believe. The three worlds correspond together by means of the 32 paths of light, which are the steps of the sacred ladder. Every true thought corresponds to a divine grace in heaven and a good work on earth. Every grace of God manifests the truth and produces one or many acts. Reciprocally, every act affects a truth or falsehood in the heavens, a grace or a punishment. When a man pronounces the Tetragram, say the Kabbalists, the 9 heavens sustain a shock, and then all spirits cry out upon one another, "Who is thus disturbing the kingdom of heaven?" Because your words absolutely can disturb the kingdom of heaven. Then does the earth communicate unto the first heaven the sins of the rash being who takes the eternal name in vain. And the accusing word is transmitted from circle to circle, from star to star, and from hierarchy to hierarchy. Every speech possesses 3 senses. Every act has a triple bearing, every form a triple idea, for the absolute corresponds from world to world by its forms. Every determination of human will modifies nature, affects philosophy, and is written in heaven. There are, therefore, 2 fatalities, the one resulting from the uncreated will in its accord with wisdom, the other from created wills, according with the necessity of secondary causes in their correspondence with the first cause. There is, hence, nothing indifferent in life, and our apparently most simple resolutions frequently determine an incalculable series of benefits or evils, those choices we were talking about with the timelines. Above all, in the affinities of our diaphane with the great magical agent, as we shall explain elsewhere. The triad, being the fundamental principle of the whole Kabbalah, or sacred tradition of our fathers, was necessarily the fundamental dogma of Christianity, the apparent dualism of which it explains by the intervention of a harmonious and all-powerful unity. Christ did not put his teaching into writing and only revealed it in secret to his favored disciple, the one Kabbalist, and he, a great Kabbalist among the apostles. So is the apocalypse of the book of the Gnosis, or secret doctrine of the first Christians, the key of which doctrine is indicated by an occult versicle of the Lord's Prayer, which the Vulgate leaves untranslated, while in the Greek Rite, which preserves the traditions of St. John, the priests only are permitted to pronounce it. This versicle, completely Kabbalistic, is found in the text of the Gospel according to St. Matthew, and in several Hebrew copies. The sacred word, Malkuth, substituted for Kether, which is its Kabbalistic correspondent, and the balance of Gaboro and Kesed, repeating itself in the circles or heavens called eons by the Gnostics, provide the keystone of the whole Christian temple in this occult versicle. It has been retained by the Protestants in their New Testament without their recovering its lofty and wonderful meaning, which would have unveiled to them all the mysteries of the apocalypse. But it is a tradition in the Church that the manifestation of these mysteries is held over to the last times. Malkuth, based upon Gabora and Kesed, is the Temple of Solomon, having Yakin and Boaz for its pillars, which, by the way, was not there. It is the Adamic doctrine, founded, for the one part, on the resignation of Abel, and on the other, on the labors and self-reproach of Cain. It is the equilibrium of being established on necessity and liberty, stability and motion. It is the demonstration of a universal lever, sought in vain by Archimedes. A scholar whose whole talents were employed resolved this supreme, whose whole talents were employed in being obscured, who died without seeking to be understood, resolved this supreme equation, discovered by him in the Kabbalah, and was in dread of its source transpiring if he expressed himself more clearly. We have seen one of his disciples and admirers most indignant, perhaps in good faith, at the suggestion that his master was a Kabbalist, but we can state, notwithstanding to the glory of the same learned man, that his researches have appreciably shortened our work in the occult sciences, and that the key of the Transcendental Kabbalah, above all, indicated in the arcane versicle recently cited, has been skillfully applied to an absolute reform of all the sciences in the books of Hone Ronsky. The secret virtue of the Gospels is therefore contained in 3 words, and these 3 words have established 3 dogmas and 3 hierarchies. All science reposes upon 3 principles, as the syllogism upon 3 terms. There are also 3 distinct classes, or 3 original and neutral ranks among men, who are called to advance from the lower to the higher. The Jews term these 3 series or degrees in the progress of spirits, Azia, Jedzira, and Bria. The Gnostics, who were Christian Kabbalists, called them Hylae, Psyche, and Gnosis. It is important to note that not all of the Gnostics were Christian. Right? Lumping them together is like saying Christians. Right? There are a variety of them, many different beliefs among them. Some of those beliefs concord, some of them do not. It is the exact same with the Gnosis. Right? There were many different schools, some of them predate Christianity. Hylae, Psyche, and Gnosis. By the Jews, the supreme circle was named Atziluth, and by the Gnostics, Pleroma. In the Tetragram, the triad, taken at the beginning of the word, expresses the divine copulation, taken at the end. It expresses the female and maternity. Eve has the name of 3 letters, but the primitive Adam is signified simply by the letter Yod, whence Jehovah should be pronounced Yavah. And this point takes us to the great and supreme mystery of magic embodied in the Tetrad. Alrighty then. Chapter 4, the Tetragram. Gebud, Geburo Chesed, Porta Laborum Elementa. In nature, there are 2 forces producing equilibrium, and these 3 constitute a single law. Here, then, is the triad renamed in unity, and by adding the conception of unity to that of the triad, we are brought to the tetrad, the first square and perfect number, the source of all numerical combinations and the principle of all forms. We've already stated that no, right, 3 and 4, like 3 is not intrinsically dependent upon 4. It is in counting, I guess, right? But other than that, it is not necessarily, correlation does not equal causation. That is this, personified. And it's a complete misunderstanding of the triad, which we've already discussed. And, yes, I guess it represents the square, but so does the triad if you do it right? 3 points can make a 90-degree angle. That is a square. So, yes, there are all kinds of problems with his understanding of this already. Affirmation, negation, discussion, solution. Such are the 4 philosophical operations of the human mind. Discussion conciliates negation with affirmation by rendering them necessary to each other. In the same way, the philosophical triad, emanating from the antagonisms of the duad, is completed by the tetrad. And again, right, just so we're clear, the monad is unity, right? You don't require 4 to get unity. Unity would actually be 1. The 4 square ground of all truth. According to the consecrated dogma, there are 3 persons in God, and these 3 constitute only one deity. 3 and 1 provide the conception of 4, because unity is required to explain the 3. I've already explained it. Hence, in almost all languages, the name of God consists of 4 letters. And in Hebrew, these four are really three, because, that makes absolute sense. Because if the name of God has to consist of four letters, it absolutely makes sense that the four letters is really three. Absolutely not obscuring things which should be clear. One of them being repeated twice with a different pronunciation. E-I-A. That's how it's pronounced. Yahweh, Yahweh. Not the same. That which expresses the word and the creation of the word. Two affirmations make two corresponding denials, either possible or necessary. Being is declared, nothing is not. The affirmation as word produces affirmation as realization, or incarnation of the word, and each of these affirmations corresponds to the denial of the opposite. Thus, in the opinion of the Kabbalists, the name of the demon, or of evil, is composed of the same letters as the name of God, or goodness, but spelled backwards. That is because God contains both positive and negative. Hey, what do you know? The evil is the last reflection, or imperfect mirage, of light and shadow. Now, there are some things which are intrinsically evil, right? All of humanity agrees, mostly. Murder, that's a good one. Now, rape is not nearly as universal as it should be. Assaulting someone unprovoked. These are things that we consider to be evil, right? But evil's a relative term. Now, some people consider drinking to be evil. It's not. Some people consider fornication at all to be evil. It's not, right? That's a relative thing. Some things are intrinsically evil. They are intrinsically detrimental to the betterment of humanity. They are opposed to getting better. Murder is a key to that, right? There is no getting better from having killed someone else. You can repent from it, you can change your life, you can do good things, but forever you have taken the life of another person, and that is intrinsically evil unless you are acting in self-defense of yourself or someone else. Intrinsically evil. And so that is evil. But all the rest of the things that we consider evil, well, not all of them, but most of them, are relative, depending on how you grew up. Your morality is not necessarily the best one. My morality is not necessarily the best one. It is merely the one I operate with, the one that I relay. And if I am wrong, I am willing to be corrected in that. Evil is the last reflection or imperfect mirage of light and shadow. Again, is casting the wrong spin upon it, right? It is saying that this thing is necessarily oppositional, and it's not necessarily so. What we consider evil, in some cases, is guiding us towards good, right? Bad circumstances, like my broken leg, can lead to lessons of better understanding, such as gratefulness. But all which exist, whether of good or evil, in light or darkness, exist and manifest by the Tetragram. No, actually, well, no, the logos, right? I'm trying to think, because you got the monad, and then that's divided into the oppositional, and then you have the spirit in motion. So that would be 3, not 4. The affirmation of unity supposes the number 4. No, it does not. It supposes the number 1. Like, that is blowing my mind. Like, how do you even get there? The affirmation of unity supposes the number 4. No, it doesn't. 4 is like 3 divisions from unity. Like, I don't understand that. That doesn't make any logical sense whatsoever. It is not something that you can just pull out of this. Somebody had to explain this to you and apologize for it, right? Like, unity is intrinsically one. Like, intrinsically, with no separation, unity is one. Supposes the number 4. Unless it turns in unity itself, as in a vicious circle. Now, a circle will absolutely represent 1, but that is 1 point. So also the triad, as we have already observed, is explained by the duad and resolved by the tetrad, which is the squared unity of even numbers and the quadrangular base of the cube. Unity of construction, of solidity, and of measure. Alright, so the squared unity of even numbers, like all of them, well, that would be 2. That would be 2, right? The base reductor of all even numbers is going to be 2. Not 4, 2. The Kabbalistic Tetragram, Yod Heva, expresses God in humanity and humanity in God. The 4 astronomical cardinal points are, relatively to us, the yea and the nay of light, east and west, and the yea and nay of warmth, south and north. And again, we've got a problem because cold is in the south too, boss. I understand if you got a heliocentric view of the northern hemisphere is better than the southern hemisphere, then you cut it off at the equator. But that's kind of not how geology actually works, right? There is a North Pole and it's fucking cold. There's a South Pole, it is equally cold. As we have already said, according to the sole dogma of the Kabbalah, that which is invisible nature reveals that which is in the domain of invisible nature, or secondary causes are in strict proportion and analogous to the manifestations of the first cause. So is this first cause invariably revealed by the cross, that unity made up of 2. The unity made up of 2. Man, this is that key to the mysteries of India and Egypt, the Tao of the patriarchs, the divine sign of Osiris. I almost did the Tao instead of doing this study, and I probably should have. It's shorter. The Stauros of the Gnostics, the keystone of the temple, the symbol of occult masonry. The cross, central point of the junction of the right angles of 2 infinite triangles. Man, the reaching here. The cross, which in the French language seems to be the first root and fundamental substantive of the verb to believe and the verb to grow, thus combining the conceptions of science, religion, and progress. The great magic agent, manifests by 4 kinds of phenomena and has been subjected to the experiments of profane science under 4 names: caloric, light, electricity, and magnetism. That is the Logos. That is the Triad. It has also received the names of Tetragram, Enri, Azoth, Ether, Odd, Magnetic Fluid, Soul of the Earth, Lucifer, etc. The great magic agent and the 4th emanation of the life principle, of which the sun is the 3rd form, see the initiates of the school of Alexandria and the dogma of Hermes Trismegistus. In this way, the eye of the world, as the ancients called it, is the mirage of the reflection of God, and the soul of the earth is a permanent glance of the sun, which the earth conceives and guards by impregnation. The moon concurs in this impregnation of the earth by reflecting a solar image during the night, so that Hermes was right when he said of the great agent, "The sun is its father, the moon is its mother." No, that is simply something someone is reading into it, right? That is anthropomorphizing the cosmos. The sun is not masculine. The moon is not feminine. We assign these attributes to it. Then he adds, "The wind has borne it in the belly thereof." So the wind held the sun in its belly, because the atmosphere is the recipient and, as it were, the crucible of the solar rays, by means of which there forms that living image of the sun which penetrates the whole earth and fructifies it, and determines all that is produced at its surface by its emanations and permanent currents, analogous to those of the sun itself. This solar agent subsists by 2 contrary forces, one of attraction and one of projection. Whence Hermes says that it ascends and descends eternally. The force of attraction is always fixed at the center of bodies, that of projection in their outlines or at their surface. That is an electromagnetical concept. You should look that up. I've got a video on it. By this dual force, all is created and all preserved. Its motion is a rolling up and an unrolling, which is successive and indefinite, or rather, simultaneous and perpetual, by spirals of opposite movements which never meet.
It is the same movement as that of the sun, which attracts and repels at once all the planets of its system. To be acquainted with the movement of this terrestrial sun in such a manner as to be able to take advantage of its currents and direct them is to have accomplished the great work and to be master of the world. Okay. To be acquainted with the movement of the terrestrial sun in such a manner as to be able to take advantage of its currents and direct them. That's farming. That is solar harvesting for electricity. That is not magical works. And I say that with a small degree of authority because you can manipulate these forces whether or not the sun is in the sky, right? Whether or not it is the reflected light of the moon or whether the moon is not reflecting any light, you can still do the exact same thing. The light that you see, the internal sun, you can move that energy regardless of whether or not the actual sun is visible in the sky. And so, knowing that the sun moves, being able to take advantage of its currents and direct them is farming. It is knowing the seasons and planting, but not necessarily magical work. Now, I manipulate the electromagnetic forces of creation, which is what the sun emits, right? No holds barred on that. But it is not intrinsic to go to the sun to pull those energies. They surround you. Yes, they emanate from the sun in our solar system, but we're also getting some from other solar systems. What do you mean, Pitt? You see the stars? Did that light make it here? That's electromagnetism too. And so it is not intrinsic to our sun. It is intrinsic to all of the logos of which the sun is a manifestation of, right? Light, heat, change, that is logos. The sun is a manifestation of the logos. It gives off light, heat, and change, same way that you do, right? And so, yes and no, once again, right? This is a very simplistic understanding of it. This is base level. You're just beginning to understand that there is a concept, not a, you should write a 400-word book that you understand something. And again, I use this force, right? It is not something I am talking about because I read it somewhere else. I am talking about it because I have used it. Armed with such a force, you may make yourself adored. The crowd will believe you are a god. That is an exceedingly stupid way to use it. The absolute secret of this direction has been in the possession of certain men and can yet be discovered. And it is the great magical arcanum, depending on an incommunicable axiom and on an instrument, which is the great and unique Athanor of the highest grade of Hermeticists. The incommunicable axiom is Kabbalistically enclosed in the 4 letters of the Tetragram, arranged in the following manner. You can see the illustration here. I cannot read Hebrew, right? It says Tarot and Enri in the letters of the word Azoth and Enri, written Kabbalistically. Where is Azoth? Is that what this is? I see Enri. I don't see Azoth. I see Tarot. Written Kabbalistically, and in the monogram of Christ as embroidered on the laborum, which the Kabbalist pastel interprets by the word rota, whence the adepts have formed their tarot or tarot, by the repetition of the first letter, thus indicating the circle, and suggesting that the word is put backwards. All magical science is comprised in the knowledge of this secret. To know it, and have the courage to use it, is human omnipotence. To reveal it to a profane person is to lose it. I haven't lost anything. To reveal it even to a disciple is to abdicate in favor of that disciple. Well, slight correction. I have not given the word, right? I have the word. I can use the word. I have not technically given it away. I have hinted at it quite severely. I have even hinted at it in this particular video. And again, I've got a whole video on that. Who, henceforward, possesses the right of life and death over his master. I am speaking from the magical standpoint, and I will certainly slay him for fear of dying himself. But this has nothing in common with deeds qualified as murder in criminal legislation. The practical philosophy, which is the basis and point of departure for our laws, does not recognize the facts of bewitchment and of occult influences. We touch here upon extraordinary revelations and are prepared for the unbelief and derision of the incredulous fanaticism. Voltairean religion has also its fanatics. Pace, the great shades, who must now be lurking sullenly in the vaults of the Pantheon, while Catholicism, strong ever in its practices and prestige, chants the office overhead. The perfect word, that which is adequate to the thought which expresses, always virtually contains or supposes a tetrad, the idea with its three necessary and correlated forms. Then the image of the thing expressed with the three terms of the judgment which qualifies it. When I say beings exist, I affirm implicitly that the void is non-existent. A height, a breadth, which the height subdivides longitudinally, a depth separated from the height by the intersection of, the intersection of the breadth. Such is the natural tetrad composed of two lines at right angles to one another. Nature also has four motions produced by two forces which sustain each other by their tendency in an opposite direction. Now, the law which rules bodies is analogous to that which governs minds, and that which governs minds is the very manifestation of God's secret, that is to say, of the mystery of the creation. Imagine a watch having two parallel springs with an engagement that makes them work in an opposite direction, so that the one is unwinding, winds up the other. In this way, the watch will wind up itself, and you will have discovered perpetual motion. No, the engagements should be at two ends and of extreme accuracy. Is this beyond attainment? We think not. You're wrong, right? If you have two forces counteracting each other, then there is no motion. But when it is found out, the inventor will understand by analogy all the secrets of nature, progress in direct proportion to the resistance. The absolute movement of life is thus the perpetual consequence of two contrary tendencies which are never opposed. When one seems to yield to the other, it is a spring which is winding up, and you may expect a reaction. That is true, right? That is not the same thing that is being said up there, right? The moment and characteristics of which it is quite possible to foresee and determine. For every action, there is indeed a response. That is the fourth law of creation. Hence, at the period of the most extreme Christian fervor was the reign of the Antichrist, known and predicted. But Antichrist will prepare and determine the second advent and final triumph of the man-God. There will be no incarnation of the Antichrist. This, again, is a vigorous and Kabbalistic conclusion contained in the gospel premises. Hence, the Christian prophecy comprises a fourfold revelation. 1. The fall of the old world and triumph of the gospel under the first advent. 2. Great apostasy and coming of the Antichrist. 3. The fall of the Antichrist and recurrence to Christian ideas. 4. Definitive triumph of the gospel, or second advent, designated under the name of the last judgment. This fourfold prophecy contains, as will be seen, two affirmations and two negations. The idea of two ruins or universal deaths, and of two resurrections. 4. To every conception which appears upon the social horizon, an east and a west, a zenith and a nadir, may be ascribed without fear of error. Thus is the philosophical cross the key of prophecy, and all gates of science may be opened with the pentacle of Ezekiel, the center of which is a star formed by the interlacement of two crosses. Does not human life present itself also under these four phases or successive transformations? Birth, life, death, immortality? No. There is birth, there is life, there is death. We do not know about immortality. I believe it, I do. I really believe that the soul is eternal, that we were somewheres and that we will return somewheres. I believe that, but it is speculative. Nobody has been there, right? Even the people who have had near-death experiences, I am one of them, does not prove anything. It can be a hallucination. It can be completely made in your mind. That is a truth. That is why it will always remain speculation. And so that is why this is not true, right? Birth, death, and life, those are trackable. Immortality is not. It is an assumption that we make, sometimes based upon experiences that we have. But that does not make it a fact. It is possible, that is true. But it is not a true that is true, right? No, there is no firmness to that. We can believe it all we want. We will not know until we get there. That's part of the faith element. Back to the text. And remark here that the immortality of the soul, necessitated as a complement to the tetrad, is Kabbalistically proved by analogy, which is the sole dogma of the truly universal religion, as is the key of science and the universal law of nature. As a fact, death can be no more an absolute end than birth is a real beginning. And again, that is speculative. You can take it as truth if you wish to. Birth proves the pre-existence of the human being, since nothing is produced from nothing, and death proves immortality, since being can no more cease to be than nothingness can cease to be nothingness. That is a logical chain that does make sense, right? If nothing can come from nothing, then the soul had to exist somewhere. I agree. I do. I believe that we are the individualized piece of the divine sent here into this 5D navigation device to experience life in all of its glory and all of its travesty. We are here to experience it, to get the knowledge, the lesson, the learning, the change, the motion, the heat, to absorb that. We are here for that, right? And so I believe that the soul is eternal. I believe that it was somewheres. I believe that it is going somewhere else. But again, that is speculative. This is being stated as factual, right? This was proved by the speculations of someone. No, it wasn't. It was not proved. You can speculate about it. You can. Right? I'm not even really knocking that. Speculate away. Just don't claim that it is fact. Right? When I tell you my stuff, right, I try to remember. I may not always remember, but I do try to remember this is my experience. I can relay it. I cannot give it to you. Take it with a grain of salt. Put it to the test. Sorry. Being and nothingness are two absolutely irreconcilable ideas, with this difference that the idea of nothingness, which is altogether negative, issues from the idea of being, whence nothingness cannot even be understood as an absolute negation, while the notion of being can never be referred to that of nothingness, and still less can it come forth therefrom. And all of that is perfectly fine logical arguments, right? But they don't prove anything. To say that the world has been produced out of nothing is to advance a monstrous absurdity. All that is proceeds from what has been, and consequently nothing that is can ever more cease to be. The succession of forms is produced by the alternatives of movement. They are the phenomena of life which replace one another without destroying themselves. And this is true, right? When you die, your body dissolves. It goes back into the earth to be reabsorbed into other living organisms. That is true. Nothing ever ceases. Every single element that makes up you will still be here when you, the occupant of the temple, when you depart the temple. All of the pieces that were put together by the Spirit for you to navigate this 5 dimensions, that will disappear. But it won't go away forever. It will be absorbed by the earth and the earthworms and the plants to be reabsorbed into life somewhere else again at some other point in time. It's the theory of spiritual evolution. And so, in part, yes, in part, speculative. All things change, nothing perishes. The sun does not die when it vanishes from the horizon. That is true. Even the most fluidic forms are immortal, subsisting always in the permanence of their raison d'etre, which is the combination of the light with the aggregated potencies of the molecules of the first substance, and monad we were talking about. Hence, they are preserved in the astral fluid, also that monad we were talking about, and can be evoked and reproduced according to the will of the sage, as we shall see when treating of second sight and the evocation of memories in necromancy or other magical works. We will definitely be talking about that. We shall return to the great magical agent in the 4th chapter of the ritual, where we shall complete our indications of the characteristics of the great arcanum and of the means of recovering this tremendous power. Here, let us add some words about the 4 magical elements and elementary spirits. The magical elements are in alchemy salt, sulfur, mercury, and azoth. In Kabbalah, the macroprosperous, the microprosperous, and the 2 mothers. In hieroglyphics, the man, eagle, lion, and bull. In old physics, according to the vulgar names and notions, air, water, earth, and fire. But in magical science, we know that water is not ordinary water. Fire is not simply fire, etc. These expressions conceal a more recondite meaning. Modern science has decomposed the 4 elements of the ancients and reduced them to a number of so-called simple bodies. What he is talking about here are the elements of the periodic table, which at this point in time had not been isolated. We still have a couple, I think, to isolate. That which is simple, however, is the primitive substance, properly so called. That would be the elements. There is therefore only one material element, which always manifests by the tetrad in its forms. We shall therefore preserve the wise distinction of elementary appearances admitted by the ancients, and shall recognize air, fire, earth, and water as the 4 positive and visible elements of magic. The subtle and the gross, the swift and the slow dissolvent, or the instruments of heat and cold, constitute, in occult physics, the 2 positive and negative principles of the tetrad and should thus be tabulated. Azoth, eagle, air at the top, sulfur, lion, fire at the west, mercury, man, water at the east, and salt, bull, and earth at the south. That is going to directly contradict what we learned about these elements prior, right? You had cold, which would be air, and heat, which would be fire, being the north and the south earlier, right? You had earth and water to the east and west. Contradictory, often within the same chapter. Thus, air and earth represent the male principle. Fire and water are referable to the female principle. No. Once again, right? Fire is going to be the logos. That is going to be a masculine aspect. That is because it is penetrative. It is change. It is light. It is heat. It is movement. All of those things are the masculine elements. And so, fire is going to represent masculine, right? Water, however, is receptive. It absorbs heat. It absorbs and diffracts light. That is going to be feminine. Right? The same with air and earth. Air is change. Earth is generation. Again, not correct. Referable to the female principle, since the philosophical cross of pentacles, as already affirmed, is a primitive and elementary hieroglyph of the lingam of the gymnosophists. To these 4 elementary forms correspond the 4 following philosophical ideas: spirit, matter, motion, rest. As a fact, all science is comprised in the understanding of these 4 things, which alchemy has reduced to 3: the absolute, the fixed, and the volatile, referred by the Kabbalah to the essential idea of God, who is absolute reason, necessity, and liberty, a threefold notion expressed in the occult books of the Hebrews. Under the names of Kether, Kokma, and Bina for the divine world, of Tippereth, Chesed, and Geburah in the moral world, and of Yesod, Hod, and Netzah in the physical world, which, together with the moral, is contained in the idea of the kingdom or Malkuth. We shall explain in the 10th chapter this theogony as rational as it is sublime. Now, created spirits, being called to emancipation by ordeal, are placed from their birth between these four forces, two positive and two negative, and have it in their power to affirm or deny good, to choose life or death. To discover the fixed point, that is, the fixed center of the cross, to find balance. The fixed center of the cross is the first problem which is given them to resolve. Their initial conquest must be that of their own liberty. They begin by being drawn, some to the north, others to the south, some to the right, others to the left, and insofar as they are not free, they cannot have the use of reason, nor can they take flesh otherwise than in animal forms. These unemancipated spirits, slaves of the four elements, are those which the Kabbalists call elementary demons, and they people the elements which correspond to their state of servitude. Sylphs, undines, gnomes, and salamanders therefore really exist, some wandering and seeking incarnation, others incarnate and living on this earth. These are vicious and imperfect men. We shall return to this subject in the 15th chapter, which treats of enchantments and demons. Now, I hold an alternative view on this. I have the theory of spiritual evolution, which goes from the single point of the elemental existence all the way up to the divine. We reside on the fifth plane of existence. We are in 5D. We have length, width, movement, thought, and time. Those are our 5 dimensions. These elementals have access to another one. They are on the 6th plane of existence. The angels and demons are on the 7th plane of existence, and the 8th plane of existence is reunification with the divine. That is an extremely simplified version of this spiritual evolution because this is already a long video. If you are interested in more, there are several playlists linked in the corner above. That is also an occult tradition by which the ancients were led to admit the existence of 4 ages in the world. Only it was not made known to the vulgar that these ages were successive and were renewed, like the 4 seasons of the year. Thus, the Golden Age has passed, and it is yet to come. This, however, belongs to the spirit of prophecy, and we shall speak of it in the 9th chapter, which is concerned with the initiate and the seer. If we now add the idea of unity to the tetrad, we shall have, together and separately, the conceptions of the divine synthesis and analysis, the God of the initiates and that of the profane. Here, the doctrine becomes more popular and passes from the domain of the abstract. The grand hierophant intervenes. And that's going to bring us to chapter 5, the pentagram, Geburah Eke. Well, you can look at this briefly if you want to pause it. Hereunto, we have exposed the magical dogma in its more arid and abstract phases. Now, enchantments begin. Now, we can proclaim wonders and reveal the most secret things. Sorry. The pentagram signifies the domination of the mind over the elements, and by this sign are enchained the demons of the air, the spirits of the fire, the phantoms of the water, and the ghosts of the earth. I'm going to point this out real quick. There are a variety of tools. Some of those tools you can hold in your hand. Here is one of them. This is a stone that I use, clarifying my third eye and my throat. That is a tool. It holds absolutely no power whatsoever on its own. I have a whole shelf back here. It's got more tools on it. I have a wand. People have athames. Some people draw pentagrams. None of the tools have power in and of themselves. In addition to that, if you are attempting to hold a spirit, that is stupid. If you are attempting to subdue and force to your will a spirit, that is stupid. Now, that's not to say you can't do it. People do stupid things all of the time. It is almost a certainty, and that is as close as I ever get to a certainty, that the entities which are on the 6th and 7th plane would not allow an accurate prison to be described for them, right? Most of the information is at least credited with having come from the spiritual realm. That includes using the pentagram for that. If you are using the Necromonicon, this is the example I use because it is readily available. It is printed everywhere. And if you are using that, you are probably going to face some severe repercussions because these entities are not going to relay an accurate prison to you. If you are attempting to imprison any of the entities in order to use their magical powers, you are doing things wrong. And I say that fairly unequivocally. Now, I hardly ever give hard firms yes, hard firm no's. That is going to be one of the really, really close to hard firms. That is not to say that you cannot use these spirits in a cooperative manner, but again, be exceedingly cautious because the entities which are not aligned with the betterment of humankind can lie to you and do so readily. They can convince you that they are one of the good entities, and they are most certainly not. That is something that you should always bear in mind before you attempt anything even resembling summoning an entity. Back to the text. Equipped with this sign and suitably disposed, you may behold the infinite through the medium of the faculty which is like the soul's eye, and you will be ministered unto by legions of angels and hosts of fiends. I am going to point out that I have done magical works. I have been on the other side. I have been approached by an angel. It was not because I requested it. I had a spiritual experience, and yes, I was meditating, but I did not ask for that experience in the manner in which it unfolded. These are things which happened to me, possibly with the assistance of entities. I did not request it. However, I do magical works. I have healed myself. The fact that I am talking right now and we are into the second hour, amazing. It is proof, right? You may not take it as so. This might be your first video. But 4 years ago, I could not talk in this manner. 15 minutes was a stretch. There was no variability in my voice. I had assist pressing on my vocal cords, and it was literally impossible for me to talk like I am doing right now. I healed that through the use of the magnetic forces of creation, which is the Holy Spirit, which you have access through the direct will of God Almighty, the Creator, right? I did nothing through the use of infernal forces. I did nothing that required me to call upon the name of any entity. I did not summon, I did not entrap, I did not conjure any of those things. I went in prayer, fasting, and meditation to the Creator and asked for healing, and was revealed to me how to heal. It was shown to me how to manipulate these forces of creation and to heal myself, which I have done. You don't need ministered by legions of angels and hosts of fiends. You can find that, especially if your mind's eye works. Mine doesn't. I cannot imagine these things, so if they do not actually appear, I am not going to claim that they did. And now, in the first place, let us establish certain principles. There is no invisible world. There are, however, many degrees of perfection in organs. The body is the coarse and, as it were, the perishable cortex of the soul. The soul can perceive of itself and independently of the mediation of the physical organs, by means of its sensibility and its diaphane, the things, both spiritual and corporeal, which are existent in the universe. Spiritual and corporeal are simply terms which express the degrees of tenuity or density in substance. What is called the imagination within us is only the soul's inherent faculty of assimilating the images and reflections contained in the living light, which is the great magnetic agent. These images and reflections are revelations when science intervenes to reveal us their body or light. The man of genius differs from the dreamer and the fool in this only, that his creations are analogous to truth, while those of the fool and the dreamer are lost reflections and bewrayed images. Hence, for the wise man to imagine is to see, as for the magician, so to speak, is to create. Therefore, by means of the imagination, demons and spirits can be beheld really and in truth. Well, there you go. By means of the imagination. Now, it is I was not imagining my spiritual experience. I fully believe that. No, that is speculative. That is personal relations, right? I did not imagine the angelic visitation. I did not ask for them. I was not looking for them. Not in the way that they unfolded. They happened completely separate from the fact that I cannot imagine. Now, that doesn't mean I don't have creative thoughts. I can create. I have done so. I've written books. I've created a whole world out of fantasy, right? But I didn't see that. I can't imagine it. I can't visualize it. That is a literal impossibility for me. And yet, I can do magic. I have healed myself. I have affected the weather. So, you can imagine, or things can really be there. Either one of those are possible. I believe that they're really there. But, by the same token, I believe that almost everybody who actually sees them doesn't actually see the actual thing. They instead see their imagination, right? That doesn't mean that it can't happen, but it is exceedingly rare. Back to the text. But the imagination of the adept is diaphanous, whilst that of the crowd is opaque. The light of truth traverses the water as ordinary light passes through a transparent casement and is refracted by the other, as when the ordinary light falls upon a vitreous block full of scoria and foreign matter. That which most contributes to the errors of the vulgar is the reflection of depraved imaginations, one in the other. But the seer, by positive science, knows that what he imagines is true, and the event invariably confirms his vision. We shall state in the ritual after what manner this lucidity can be acquired. It is by means of this light that static visionaries place themselves in communication with all worlds, as so frequently occurred to Swedenborg, who, notwithstanding, was imperfectly lucid, seeing that he did not distinguish reflections from rays and often intermingled chimerical fancies with his most admirable dreams. We say dreams because dream is the consequence of a natural and periodical ecstasy, which we term sleep. To be in ecstasy is to sleep. Magnetic somnambulism is a production and direction of sleep. The errors which occur therein are occasioned by reflections from the diaphane of wakened persons, and, above all, of the magnetizer. Dream is vision produced by the refraction of a ray of truth. The chimerical fancy is hallucination, occasioned by reflection. The temptation of St. Anthony, with its nightmares and its monsters, represents the confusion of reflections with direct rays. So long as the soul struggles, it is reasonable. When it yields to this species of invading intoxication, it becomes mad. to disentangle the direct ray and separate it from the reflection, such is the work of the initiate. Here, let us state distinctly that this work is through all times accomplished in the world by some of the flower of mankind, that there is hence a permanent revelation by intuition, and that there is no insuperable barrier which separates souls, because there is no sudden interruptions, and no abrupt walls in nature by which minds can be divided from one another. All is transition and blending, and assuming the perfectibility, if not infinite, at least indefinite, of human faculties, it will be seen that every person can attain to see all, and therefore to know all. There is no void in nature, all is peopled. There is no true death in nature, all is alive. Seest thou that star? Asked Napoleon of Cardinal Fesch. No, sire. I see it, said the emperor, and he most certainly did. When great men are accused of having been superstitious, it is because they beheld what remains unseen by the crowd. Men of genius differ from simple seers by their faculty of sensibly communicating to other men what they themselves perceive, and of making themselves believed by the force of enthusiasm and sympathy. Such persons are the medium of the divine word. Let us now state the manner in which visions operate. All forms correspond to ideas, and there is no idea which has not its proper and peculiar form. The primordial light, which is the vehicle of all ideas, is the mother of all forms, and transmits them from emanation to emanation merely diminished or modified, according to the density of the medium. Secondary forms are reflections, which return to the front of the emanated light. The forms of objects, being a modification of light, remain in the light where the reflection consigns them. Hence, the astral light or terrestrial fluid, which we call the great magnetic agent, is saturated with all kinds of images or reflections. Now, our soul can evoke these and refer them to its diaphane, as the Kabbalists term it. Such images are always present to us and are only effaced by the more powerful impressions of reality during waking hours, or by the preoccupation of the mind, which makes our imagination inattentive to the fluidic panorama of the astral light. When we sleep, this spectacle presents itself spontaneously before us, and in this way, dreams are produced. Dreams, vague and incoherent of some governing will, do not remain active during the sleep, giving, even unconsciously to our intelligence, a direction to the dream, which then transforms into vision. That is now known as lucid dreaming. Animal magnetism is nothing else but an artificial sleep, produced by the voluntary or enforced union of two wills, one of which is awake while the other slumbers, that is, one of which directs the other in the choice of reflections for the transformation of dreams into visions, and the attainment of truth by means of images. Thus, somnambulists do not actually travel to the place where they are sent by the magnetizer. They evoke its images in the astral light, and can behold nothing which does not exist in that light. The astral light has a direction action on the nerves, which are its conductors to the animal economy, transmitting it to the brain, whence also, in the state of somnambulism, it is possible to see by means of the nerves without being dependent upon radiant light, the astral fluid being a latent light, in the same way that physics recognizes the existence of a latent caloric. Magnetism between two persons is certainly a wonderful discovery, but the magnetizing of a person by himself, accomplishing his own lucidity and directing himself at will, is the perfection of magical art. The secret of this great work does not rest for discovery. It has been known and practiced by a great number of initiates, above all by the celebrated Apollonius of Tyana, who has left a theory concerning it, as we shall see in the ritual. The secret of magnetic lucidity and the direction of the phenomena of magnetism depend on two things: the agreement of minds and the complete union of wills in a direction which is possible and determined by science. This is for the operation of magnetism between two or more persons. Solitary magnetism requires preparations of which we have spoken in our initial chapter when enumerating and establishing in all their difficulty the essential qualities of a veritable adept. In the following chapters we shall further elucidate this important and fundamental point. The empire of the will over the astral light, which is the physical soul of the four elements, is represented in magic by the pentagram, which we have set at the head of this chapter. The elementary spirits are subservient to this sign when employed with understanding, and by placing it in the circle or on the table of evocations, they can be rendered tractable, which is magically called to imprison them. Let us briefly explain this marvel. All created beings communicate with one another by signs, and all adhere to a certain number of truths expressed by determinate forms. The perfection of forms increases in proportion to the detachment of spirits, and those that are not overweighted by the chains of matter recognize by intuition out of hand whether a sign is the expression of a real power or of a precipitate will. The intelligence of the wise man therefore gives value to his pentacle, as science gives weight to his will, and spirits comprehend this power immediately. That is telling you that there is no inherent power in the sign. It is you giving value to the pentacle. Thus, by means of the pentagram, spirits can be forced to appear in vision. That sounds like something you should be practicing, right? Forcing an entity to do something. Whether in the waking or sleeping state, by themselves leading before our diphane their reflection, which exists in the astral light, if they have lived, or a reflection analogous to their spiritual logos, if they have not lived on earth. This explains all visions, and accounts for the dead invariably appearing to seers, either such as they were upon earth, or such as they are in the grave, never as they subsist in a condition which escapes the perceptions of their actual organism. Pregnant women are influenced more than others by the astral light, which concurs in the formation of the child and perpetually offers them reminiscences of the forms which abound therein. This explains how it is that women of the highest virtue deceive the malignity of observers by equivocal resemblances. On the fruit of their marriage they impress frequently an image which has struck them in a dream, and it is thus that the same physiognomies are perpetuated from generation to generation. It is because you imagine your nose on your child is why they get it. It has nothing to do with your DNA combining with someone else. It is because you imagine it. The Kabbalistic use of the pentagram, and like I addressed this yesterday, and I'm going to hit it again. Nobody has ever wanted to have a child with Down syndrome. Now, when you have a child with Downs, that's kind of a blessing, but it is not a blessing that you ask for. Right? Nobody has ever asked for that. Nobody has ever envisioned in their mind that their child came out with this affliction, right? An extra chromosome. They just don't do that. And when you imagine your child, you imagine them healthy, whole, and perfect. The Kabbalistic use of the pentagram can therefore determine the appearance of unborn children, and an initiated woman might endow her son with the characteristics of Nero or Achilles, as much as those of Louis XIV or Napoleon. We shall indicate the method in our ritual. The pentagram is called in Kabbalah the sign of the microcosm, that sign so exalted by Goethe in the beautiful monologue of Faust. Ah, how do my senses leap at the sight! I feel the young and sacred pleasure of life bubbling in my nerves and veins. Was it a god who traced this sign which stills the vertigo of my soul, fills my poor heart with joy, and, in a mysterious rapture, unveils the forces of nature around me? Am I myself a god? No. All is so clear to me. I behold these simple lines, the revelation of active nature to my soul. I realize for the first time the truth of the wise man's words. The world of spirits is not closed. Thy sense is obtruse, thy heart is dead. Arise, bathe, O adept of science, thy breast still enveloped by an earthly veil, in the splendors of the dawning day. On the 24th of July in the year 1854, the author of this book, Eliphas Levi, made experiments of evocation with the pentagram, after due preparation by all the ceremonies which are indicated in the 13th chapter of the ritual. The success of this experiment, details of which as regards its principles will be found in the corresponding chapter of this, or doctrinal part, establishes a new pathological fact, which men of science will admit without difficulty. The repeated experience in all 3 times gave results truly extraordinary, but positive and unmixed with hallucination. We invite skeptics to make a conscientious and intelligent attempt before shrugging their shoulders and smiling. The figure of the pentagram, which this is not, perfected in accordance with science and used by the author in his experiment, is that which is found at the head of this chapter and is more perfect than any in the Keys of Solomon or in the magical calendars of Tycho Brahe and Dao Chintao. We must, however, remark that the use of the pentagram is most dangerous for operators who are not in possession of its complete and perfect understanding. And that I will agree with. You probably don't know what you're doing. You probably should not be doing it. Now, he's going to tell us later what this actual thing that he did was. Back to the text. The direction of the points of the star is in no sense arbitrary and may change the entire character of the operation, as we shall explain in the ritual. Paracelsus, that innovator in magic, who surpassed all other initiates in his unaided practical success, affirms that every magical figure and every Kabbalistic sign of the pentacles which compel spirits may be reduced to 2, which are the synthesis of all the others. These are the sign of the macrocosm, or the seal of Solomon, the form of which we have already given. That was the symbol we just saw, the 6-pointed star. And now reproduce here, and that of the microcosm, more potent even than the first, that is to say, the pentagram, of which he provides the most minute description in his occult philosophy. If it is to be asked how a sign can exercise so much power over spirits, we inquire in return why the whole Christian world bows down before the sign of the cross. The sign is nothing by itself, and has no force apart from the doctrine of which it is the summary and the logos. And again, misunderstanding logos. Now, a sign which sums, by their expression, all the occult forces of nature, a sign which has ever exhibited to elementary spirits and others a power greater than their own, naturally fills them with respect and fear, and enforces their obedience by the empire of science and of will over ignorance and weakness. By the pentagram also is measured the exact proportions of the great and unique athanor necessary to the confection of the philosophical stone and the accomplishment of the great work. The most perfect alembic in which the quintessence can be elaborated is conformable to this figure, and the quintessence itself is represented by the sign of the pentagram. And that is going to bring us to the end of the study of numbers, right? He doesn't get all the way up to 10. He stops at 5. I went all the way to 10 in my book. I hold some unconventional... Well, hold on. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a series of somewhat difficult topics. I understand I hold some unconventional beliefs, and I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but I do not apologize for it. I am here to discern the truth. There is a little bit of truth in here, but there's a whole lot of misunderstanding. Misunderstanding the logos is the biggest problem that I have found so far in all of these works. Now, granted, my understanding of the logos is revelatory. It is something that was given to me. I went searching for it, and I received it. So what I relay in this video, the divine and the Trinity explained, is that, right? It is, but before the beginning there was God, and then God limited himself into the creation and became the Spirit, and then the Spirit went into motion, and that is the Logos. There can be no personification of the Logos. In the exact same way that we cannot, in reality, personify God. God is beyond the Spirit. The Spirit is entirely God, but it is not God in its entirety. There are parts that we don't know about. God limited the infinite into the finite, which then became the Logos. That is intrinsic to working the magical forces. When I talk about the things that I have done, like you can hear my voice dying right now, right? We are 2 hours in. 2 hours in. I couldn't talk for an hour a year ago, right? It was exceedingly difficult. My vocal cords are weak. For 3 years, there was a cyst pressing against them, and it distorted them out of shape. When I was doing this, it was partly vocal therapy so that I could get back to talking, but I still had the cyst. It was not until I took this route, when I decided to go this way, to walk with God in this manner, showing the difference between the things that I know and the things that are speculative, the things that are true and the things that may not be true. When I walked that path, that's when my voice got better. Now, this right here, this is my voice. This is what I normally talk with. This is my projection voice. A year ago, this voice was nothing. There was no sound whatsoever in this tone of voice at all. Right now, I'm building back the stamina, right? I'm stretching those vocal cords back out so that they can make the appropriate sounds. But those muscles get a little bit weak. I am still fixing it. It is not something which is instantaneous. None of the healing that I've done has been instantaneous. The cyst disappeared overnight, right? It literally broke when I made the decision, and the next day the cyst was gone. But I didn't get the ability to talk except through work. I still focus the energy there. I still work on healing it, but it's not quite all the way fixed yet, and that's perfectly fine. I healed my shoulder. I had surgery on this shoulder 20 years ago. I only got 80%, right? I could lift my arm about that far. Now, I've got 100% functionality back in my shoulder. I've got strength back in my shoulder. My back, I was in a car wreck, severely messed up. That pain is gone. The tremors for, 15 years. I had tremors on the left side of my body, completely uncontrollable. They're gone. These are things I have done because of the things that I relay. I'm not here to deceive you. I'm not here to drag you down a path that leads in a cult, right? I'm here to relay truthful information so that you can impact your life in measurable ways, so that you can enact healing within yourself, so that you can forgive yourself without the need to think that you have to kill somebody to do it. These things are important to me. That's why I do what I do. The rewards come whether or not I am willing them, right? The healing I asked for. I was given the ability to heal myself and told that I had to tell people, and so I do. And you can believe it, or you can dismiss it. Doesn't matter to me either way. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow, throw me a comment. If you agree or disagree with anything that was stated, put it in the box down below, and if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is another work you would like to see me discuss in the manner that we are doing here, drop that in the box as well. And if you really like what I'm doing over here, hit me with that super thanks. Consider joining for a membership or picking up a copy of my book. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pit Steak. Peace.